I'm really excited to be back in New York. It's like the first time I've been back since the pandemic and actually speaking to people, so this is very exciting for me. Want to kind of get up here and talk to everyone a little bit about App Store optimization, what we've learned over the last several years. GummyCube's a company that's been doing ASO for 12 years, so we've got a lot of experience in this. And what I really want to do here is debunk the myth that ASO is like SEO. I go online every day and I see people referring to ASO as like SEO for apps. And when you actually look at the data and how the algorithms of the App Store and Play Store work, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it can actually hurt your optimization process and strategy. And I guess before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit why I'm qualified to even be here and chat with you. So, GummyCube has 12 plus years of experience in App Store optimization. I've been launching mobile apps and working with app marketing since 1999. I helped launch some of the first downloadable apps that ever existed on the Brew and J2ME platforms. 10 years before the App Store and Play Store existed. We did some of the first multiplayer games where you could play on the phone against the PC, all sorts of cool stuff. So I've been in mobile literally since I was a career child in many different ways. And so, we've learned a lot. And we learned a lot from our experience back then with the carrier vending machines and when we start looking at how Apple and Google have built out their stores. So just first setting the record straight on where data comes from and what you really need to look out for from an optimization standpoint. SEO for apps is a terrible analogy. When you think about App Store optimization, you're really optimizing the whole store listing, all the assets on the store listing. You're influencing hundreds of keywords and places at a time because at the end of the day, Apple and Google have merchandising engines, not just a search engine. They're looking at audiences behind keywords. They're doing A/B testing with you inside the store to experiment with where they're going to place you and expand your presence. User behavior changes sporadically and much more frequently in the App Store than on the web. Trends change very quickly. And user search patterns are very different. Literally, the words people use to search to discover things will not match what they search for on the web to discover things, nor will their intention when they're looking for what they download. SEO, very kind of narrowly focused. You want to find the one keyword to rule them all, right? That's not true with App Store optimization. User behavior generally, stays relatively consistent. It takes longer for Google to make changes on the web than it does Apple and Google in the stores. And search queries can be really long or they can be really short. When we think about kind of what the real differences are and we break down how people search in the store versus the way they search on the web, we look at three different kinds of search queries, right? There are do search queries, right? People looking to do something. There are no search queries where people are looking for information. And generally, when people search in the App Store, they're not looking for information. They're looking for products and features and services. Then, of course, you have the go search queries, right? I want to go to a certain destination. Those destinations in the App Store are going to be very different than the destinations on the web. When you look at mobile search, we've got some examples here, right? But it's important to kind of put search side by side. When you have really good data that actually is from mobile, from the App Store and Play Store, and then you put it aside, even Google's type-in search recommendations on the web, they're not going to match. The semantics are going to be different, and what you discover and what people are clicking on when they download are going to be different products, different brands, and different services. A lot of people think about keyword targeting, and I used this analogy earlier, but I want to use it again. A lot of people think about the one keyword to rule them all. Which one has most volume? Which one do I really care about? But in the mobile world, it's about merchandising. It's about how you build the largest footprint for your app in the store so Apple and Google can gather a ton of data about your app and put you in all the right places in front of the right audiences. Winning on one keyword won't help you win the entire store. And if you're an app at scale that's a brand, that's actually really important. So, number one, your app probably ranks for way more keywords than you think. Any tool that you might be using for ASO that asks you to type in the keywords you want to track is already doing you a disservice because they're not showing you the entire picture of where Apple and Google merchandise you in the store. You can't understand where the algorithms think you're relevant when you're looking at such a limited picture. So you're missing opportunities for indexation. The other interesting fact that not a lot of people talk about is a lot of these tools actually use Apple Search Ads popularity data or web search data to determine their volume information, which is a critical miss and also a critical miss from a disclosure standpoint. They should really tell you where they're getting their data from, and so you can evaluate whether that's the right data for you. Anyone who asks you what are your 5 most important keywords when you start a conversation is asking you the wrong question when it comes to ASO. They should be asking you, how are you distributed in the store? What audiences are you relevant for? Do you understand what your market share is in the store, and how can you grow that market share? Those are the right questions at scale from an ASO perspective. Anyone mentioning popularity scores, I understand they might be experts at Apple search ads, but running an Apple search ads campaign is not the same thing as ASO. There are some useful insights that you can get running a search ads campaign, like your conversion rate per keyword. That's certainly very useful from an A/B testing standpoint. But a popularity score does not necessarily determine organic search volume for keyword over time. It's a way that Apple and Google traffic advertisers to buy where there's available inventory. At the end of the day, that's what it's designed for. So you also kind of have to do more with a lot less, right? So when you look at the physical space in the App Store and the way people search, the vast majority of searches in the App Store and Play Store are 2 to 3 word phrases. They usually relate to features associated with what people are using inside a mobile app. Certainly brands drive volume, but if you are a large brand, you should be talking to your marketing team about how much traffic is coming outside of your brand, because that's how you grow your market share in the store and not just recycle customers who might already know your brand or be going from a web product to a mobile product to download a new interface. When you look at categorical search queries, right, that on the web, that particularly doesn't apply to mobile because what people search for isn't the same. And so, you've got to do a lot more with your metadata and creatives as a result. You have to understand how to cater to the right search queries and features. You've got to understand that when your assets are presented in the store, particularly where people are searching, your screenshots are 30% of their normal size. 80% of users on the Apple App Store download right from the search result. They never even go to your store listing if they're organic. So when you optimize your store listing in A/B test, for a lot of people, it's almost like you're optimizing against your paid user acquisition. But if you want to optimize against organic, you've really got to look at conversion against search, which is a different metric than your store listing optimization. So those are all things that are just really important to keep in mind. Here's the other important point, I think. When we think about ASO, we think about audiences, right? You have an audience that's looking for a certain feature. They might be searching for your app in 100 different ways. But all of those keywords, all of those ways they're looking for your app are going to convert around similar things as long as the concept or the feature is the same. So we want to understand who your audience is and all the ways they might get to your app based on a feature. And then we want to be able to A/B test in a way where we can optimize conversion against that audience while we also improve what's going on with your store listing, because that's how you get Apple and Google not only to merchandise you in more places, but rank better where they merchandise you, right? Apple and Google, a lot of people don't know this, they measure your conversion in the search result separate from your store listing, and they're not using your store listing conversion rate to determine rankings. They're using your conversion in search to determine rankings, which is important for each keyword or group of keywords that's related to each other. Paid and organic, they do go hand in hand, right? I love Apple search ads. I think it's a great platform. But I think that the useful data that you can get from search ads is more with what you can do from an A/B testing and conversion standpoint. Popularity scores aren't always a perfect fit when you're looking for what people search for organically. One other point that I think is important to make, and this is something that a lot of people get confused about because there are a lot of tools that offer different features. Apple and Google do not provide any third-party impressions or installs per keyword. That data is not provided from the store. And the way a lot of people are getting that data is by looking at essentially what are estimates that aren't disclosed as estimates. A lot of people assume that's data coming from Apple or Google when it's not, with all these third-party tools. And what these tools usually do is they simply go and they take the keywords they know about, they look at your total search downloads, and they stratify across those keywords based on your rankings and how much might come from one keyword or another. But that doesn't take into account everywhere else Apple and Google's merchandise you. Adobe Photoshop ranks for 6,000 keywords. How is it useful to look at only 50 and say 100% of your search volume comes from there? That doesn't make sense, right? So you have to think about this in a different way. The other thing is really adopt the e-commerce mentality, right? When I think about App Store optimization, I think of it like I have a product on Amazon.com. And I want Amazon to merchandise me in as many shopping carts as possible and on as many related products as possible, and that's audience optimization, right? And then it's understanding how your audience gets to a certain place and ideally downloads your product, right? So we look at it in terms of, well, why do we look at it this way? Well, one, the user experience and interface really resembles the experience on an e-commerce store, not the experience on web. There's merchandising involved. Nobody talks about merchandising when they're doing SEO because Google doesn't merchandise you, right? But the App Store and Play Store do, right? It's an important concept to remember. Keyword rank changes every day, and it changes every day not just based on what you do, but based on how well your competitors do. You could be doing really well, but if your competitor runs an A/B test and they're experimenting and their conversion rate goes up incrementally the next day, you'll lose 48 hours later in terms of your rankings, and you have to respond to that and track what's going on. That's more of an e-commerce thing. It's very dynamic. And the user search behaviors are also different. And I just want to draw this. I used a Nintendo example because I'm a total geek from the 80s, so I like video games. But when we look at this and we compare an Amazon listing to the App Store, you start to see a lot of similarities, right? So it's not just what I'm saying, what the raw data says, it's even structurally how the stores are built. And it's very important to think of things this way. From a data standpoint, you look at the UI and UX of both stores. One other important thing to think about is just what works on Apple doesn't always work on Google, right? Google doesn't offer every user the ability to download in the search results. It's not a browse-based one-click experience, to use another Amazon analogy. You have to do a second click. It's more like the old school add to cart experience, whereas Apple lets you download from anywhere. And so that difference in user flow really changes what works from a conversion perspective. And that's why it's important to A/B test on both stores, measure conversion across channels, even search and browse within the store separately, and understand how what you're doing is affecting that user flow separately. I think it's important to maintain a brand if you have a great brand, but it's also important to understand you might want to present it slightly differently in each store to get the best results. So in summary, sources or data are very crucial to understand. And you should really question where your data comes from. Not just the tools you use, but where they source that data from. Because ultimately, if you're looking at search ads data or you're looking at web data, that's great for SEO and that's great for paid user acquisition. But how does that translate to long-term trends in the store? How does it translate to an understanding of related keywords and how Apple and Google will merchandise you? It doesn't. Because a bidding strategy for SEM is different than a strategy for ASO. It's like the difference between trying to build a 401k and a retirement portfolio in the stock market versus taking advice from a day trader. You wouldn't do that, so you shouldn't do that here. We also think ASO is foundational to growth, right? At the end of the day, whether you're concerned about paid user acquisition, whether you're concerned about organic, everyone lands on your store listing, or everyone lands in your search result. And if that doesn't perform, either your organic coefficients are too low to be competitive, or your CPIs are too high because your conversion rate where people land is too low. It's not just about optimizing the campaign, it's about optimizing where people go before they download. So hopefully that's helpful. I wanted to give a great presentation now that we're back here live in New York. We're around, we have a booth. You can follow us at GummyCube on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And you can reach me at dave@gummycube.com if you'd like to chat. But thanks a lot for your time, and rock on.